From wrestling rings to White House halls, Lincoln's legacy is not just about freedom speeches. He, was a pretty bizarre person, in all honesty. Before Lincoln was the Great Emancipator, the 16th president, the face on the penny, he was a lanky Illinois lawyer, one who'd rather throw you over his shoulder in a wrestling match than argue over a bill. Yes, before he was dodging political blows, he was quite literally dodging takedowns in the ring. With over 300 matches under his belt, only one loss, and standing at an imposing 6'4", Lincoln's wrestling exploits are the stuff of legend. He came closer to Plato's conception of an ideal man than many other presidents. Physically, academically, and professionally accomplished. Each match, a testament to his physicality and sportsmanship, revealed a man who was as humble in victory as he was formidable in combat. This, however, is arguably the least controversial thing about Lincoln. This is even as Lincoln honed a mental acuity that mirrored his physical agility, a combination that would prove indispensable in the trials of leadership that lay ahead. What lay ahead was political turmoil and war. It was a nation divided, a nation where the idea of shipping off African Americans to another continent was a legitimate topic of conversation. Back to Africa wasn't just a catchphrase, it was an actual policy consideration. The purpose, of course, was to return the former slaves to their homelands, if they desired to return. This, of course, was an idea strongly supported by the 5th President, James Monroe. Such views, despite their flaws, were arguably influential to Lincoln. The succession of the Confederacy was the perfect opportunity to put plans involving current and former slaves into action. As the Civil War thundered across the states, Honest Abe found himself in a political chess game that remains controversial and complex to this very day. The famous quote about saving the Union, with or without slavery, wasn't just Lincoln waxing poetic. It was an insight into his primary motivations. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that, said Lincoln famously. But let's not think this is the extent of the now controversial views. Lincoln's support for the colonization of freed slaves wasn't just a quirky side project. Lincoln's policies, though seemingly benevolent, were marred by the contentious belief that free blacks and whites couldn't coexist in postbellum America. It was a sound example to the era's complex racial politics. The idea wasn't new, sending African Americans to Liberia, as mentioned previously, though what happened there may well have proven damning. However, criticisms of Lincoln's racial views are as varied as the historians penning them. Some laud him as a progressive visionary, while others cast him as a man of his times, engaging in the racial prejudices that were the order of the day. Yet, Lincoln's interactions with African Americans of his time, like the formidable Frederick Douglass, weren't just meet and greets. They were dialogues that chipped away at the marble of Lincoln's thoughts on race and equality, shaping his policies over time. The impact of Lincoln's policies and his untimely end left Reconstruction in the hands of less sympathetic souls, casting a long shadow over the fate of African Americans. This, however, is not the only controversial thing about Lincoln's better-known attributes. In a twist of fate, as cruel as it is ironic, Abraham Lincoln established the Secret Service on the very day he would fall victim to a bullet. It would also come to be viewed with greater and greater suspicion over time, especially given its links to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The coincidences are as follows. Both assassinations there were accompanied with loud and insistent claims that the fatal shot must have come from a different direction. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and fled to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and fled to a theater. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, and Kennedy one named Lincoln. Does this prove a connection, however? Well, not really, but it has sparked much debate and theorizing nonetheless. But let's not dwell on the grim coincidence. Instead, let's delve into the birth of an agency that would become the guardian of American currency and eventually the lives of its leaders. The Secret Service, born out of necessity in a nation where more than a third of its currency was as fake as a $3 bill, was Lincoln's answer to the rampant counterfeiting that threatened to capsize the U.S. economy. Now, the Secret Service didn't start with the flashy task of escorting VIPs to and from their duties. Their original purpose was sniffing out counterfeit currency. It was a game of cat and mouse played on a field of greenbacks. Fast forward through time, and the Secret Service takes on a role as a silent, vigilant presence, presidential bodyguards. The irony, had this role been adopted sooner, Lincoln's own story may have been a very different one. The assassinations of Garfield, McKinley, Kennedy also painted a stark picture. The need for protection was paramount. Let's not forget the controversies, the whispers of scandals that cling to the Secret Service like shadows, ideas that they themselves influenced or coerced the president, much like Rome's Praetorian Guard, or the theory that they were in the service of another person or organization altogether. The modern reality, however, is that the service has cemented itself as a cornerstone of the office of president, one that is unlikely to shift its duties or cease to exist anytime soon, controversial theorizing or not. There were many other bizarre things about Abraham Lincoln, however. Beyond the Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln's life was a tapestry of unexpected threads, each as compelling as the next. For instance, his patent. Yes, Honest Abe was the only U.S. president to hold a patent. In the midst of navigating the country's tumultuous waters, he invented a device to free steamboats stranded on sandbars. Lincoln was also more generally a technophile. In an era burgeoning with innovation, Lincoln held a deep fascination for the technological marvels of his time. He was an avid enthusiast of the telegraph, the Victorian internet, which he used with unprecedented frequency for a president. His telegraphic communications during the Civil War marked a pivotal shift in wartime strategy, embracing real-time intelligence and rapid decision-making. Lincoln's engagement with technology extended to his interest in arms development. He personally tested rifles outside the White House, his tall frame stooping to inspect the mechanisms that might turn the tide of war. His administration saw the introduction of ironclad ships, a revolution in naval warfare, reflecting his belief in the power of innovation to change the course of history. Beyond the battlefield, Lincoln's technological curiosity also touched the domestic sphere. He was known to host phono-autograph demonstrations in the White House, showcasing early sound recording technology. These moments of wonder, shared with his guests, underscored his belief in progress and invention as the driving forces of the nation's future. But Lincoln's strength wasn't just physical. It was also in his character. He suffered from melancholy, a condition we now call depression. Yet he turned his inner battles into a source of empathy, often sharing stories and jokes to lift the spirits of others. His humor was a beacon of light, not just for himself, but for a nation in its darkest hour. And in the realm of the spiritual, Lincoln's beliefs were as complex as the man himself. Though he often referenced God in his speeches, he never joined a church, and his religious views remained private and nuanced.